Hello, everyone, and welcome to This is America. Today's guest is Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute, Brian Katulis. But first, here is the top U.S. news for the week. U.S. President Donald Trump hailed his Syrian counterpart, Ahmad Al-Sharaa, after unprecedented talks at the White House Monday, saying Shara's rough past as a jihadist would help him rebuild the war-torn country. Sharaa, whose rebel forces ousted longtime ruler Bashar al-Assad late last year, was the first Syrian leader to visit the White House since the Middle Eastern country's independence in 1946. But the 43-year-old's landmark visit to the Oval Office came just days after Washington removed him from its terrorism list. Sharaa's group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, was formerly affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Trump said he wanted Syria to become very successful after more than a decade of civil war and added that he believed Sharaa can do it. The U.S. Senate took a major step toward ending the longest government shutdown in American history when it cleared the way for a formal debate on a motion to resume funding to federal agencies. The development represents significant progress toward ending a government shutdown that has dragged on for over 40 days, halted funding to federal programs, and disrupted air travel and other essential industries. The breakthrough late Sunday came after Republicans and Democratic lawmakers reached a stopgap agreement to fund the government through January, after wrangling over healthcare subsidies, food benefits, and Trump's firings of federal employees. We believe that the key for the Lebanese people to take back their country is to end Iran's malign influence through Hezbollah, said John Hurley, the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. According to him, the U.S. administration is very serious in its determination to cut off Iran's funding to Hezbollah. Hurley was part of a delegation led by Sebastian Gorka, the White House counterterrorism chief, which has met with Lebanese leaders since Sunday. Trump says Ukraine war will end in not too distant future. The war in Ukraine will end in the not-too-distant future, U.S. President Donald Trump said as he hosted Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban at the White House. And that's your U.S. recap of the week. What are the Abraham Accords? In 2020, a diplomatic breakthrough reshaped the Middle East, the Abraham Accords. Led by the U.S., the agreements normalized relations between Israel and several Arab countries, starting with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, later joined by Morocco and Sudan. The accords opened the doors for direct flights, trade, tourism, investment, and technological cooperation. They also aimed to reduce regional tensions and build new economic partnerships. The name Abraham symbolizes shared heritage among Jews, Christians, and Muslims, representing a vision of coexistence. Since then, Israeli and Arab companies have partnered on renewable energy, cybersecurity, healthcare, and education. Thousands of tourists have traveled between these countries for the first time. While the accords don't solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, supporters see them as a step toward greater regional stability, while critics argue they sidestep core political issues. The Abraham Accords marked a historic shift, turning once hostile relationships into alliances. Their long-term impact is still unfolding. It's with great pleasure that I welcome my guest, Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute, Brian Katulis. Mr. Katulis, thank you for being with us. Let's jump right in. Given the recent escalation and diplomatic messaging, do you see a viable path toward a de-escalation or a long-term peace framework between Lebanon and Israel, and what conditions would need to be met on both sides?
I see a pathway, but it's going to require a tremendous amount of work from both the Lebanese government as well as the Israeli government. On the Lebanese side, it's continuing this effort to fully disarm Hezbollah. Phase one has involved the southern part of Lebanon, south of the Litani River, but moving forward with that, because only in doing that, in eliminating the arms and the capacity that Hezbollah has, will the government be able to restore trust and confidence with the Lebanese people, first and foremost, but then secondly with Israel. The other side of the equation, it takes two to tango.
Hmm.
Israel will actually need to pull back from the five or more sites that it occupies and commit to stopping strikes, which have happened with regularity since this ceasefire has been in place since last November. So it's that confidence building, and the United States is playing, I think, a key role here, the military and others. But the central ingredient is strengthening the Lebanese armed forces and the capacity of this government to actually control law and order in its own territory.
What role can the United States and Arab and European partners realistically play in stabilizing Lebanon and reducing the risk of war? And how should their approach evolve given local political paralysis and regional uncertainty?
Well, I think the key role in the Trump administration is doing this is offering necessary financial support to the Lebanese armed forces. I think creating incentives for this process to move forward, carrots, if you will, so
Hmm.
that they take step by step, because this won't work without sufficient resources, financial resources to pay the Lebanese armed forces. So that's one key component. I think the Arab states, especially the wealthier ones, can actually play a key role as partners in that. The second is just expertise. The Lebanese army has many qualified individuals, but the training and expertise that's ongoing to increase their capacity. Because the central objective here is to make Lebanon safe, first and foremost for the Lebanese people, and then second, to provide some sort of pathway and confidence to Israel and other neighbors that Lebanon can control its own territory and take care of the needs of its own people.
How realistic do you think is the prospect of integrating, well, of course, not totally, but or disarming Hezbollah in the current political and security landscape? And what tools, domestic or international, could meaningfully drive progress?
I think it's going to be a long and winding road. It's not going to be easy, but I think Lebanon, just in the past year, has taken tremendous steps that it's never really taken before in its recent history to get to that end of the road. It's going to require not just technocratic moves by security agencies or financial support. It's going to also require some tough political decisions on the part of some politicians who benefit from the status quo, if you will. That there may be some corruption and there may be some understandings that were present in the previous governments where Hezbollah had a much stronger voice. I think it's going to just take tough politics to essentially say, let's listen to the Lebanese people. They want to move forward, not backwards here.
How would you assess, since you mentioned it earlier, how would you assess the LAF's performance and credibility in southern Lebanon today, and what reforms or support mechanisms are most needed for the LAF to assert greater authority?
Look, I think it's taken some important steps in the right direction, but what it really needs are the qualified personnel and trust of the people of that region as well. Because Hezbollah has operated, in essence, like a mafia, a criminal gang, and it's also a terrorist organization that has terrorized some of the people of southern Lebanon for years. And they're really fully embedded there. So I think what the LAF needs are the not just financial resources, but also the presence and how its capacity to build the trust with the communities to say that it can defend itself. It also needs Israel in a certain sense, and this is where, again, it takes two to tango. It
Hmm.
needs Israel to actually lessen its presence and live up to its commitments as part of the ceasefire deal. But it's a chicken and egg thing. Israel's unlikely to do that so long as it sees threats, so long as it sees actors associated with Hezbollah and other groups threatening its people and its interests. So that's where I think this needs to move forward.
How do Iran's internal priorities, economic, political, and security, shape its current strategy in Lebanon? And do you foresee any shift in Tehran's appetite to continue backing Hezbollah?
Well, look, since the devastating 12-day war in June, the Iranian regime has been on its back heels. It's down, but it's not out fully. And it's unclear to me what the leaders of Iran right now will do. It's now facing tough economic sanctions. The snapback mechanisms were reintroduced. It's got a lot of pressure from many different points. But clearly, since it invested in Hezbollah as one of its key partners, for decades. And clearly, even though there's a reduction of support and cooperation and arms flows, I don't think it's ended completely. And I think that's a big challenge. I think it was a good thing to hear Lebanese leaders tell Iran to stop meddling and interfering and essentially weakening the capacity of the state. That's the central thing that Lebanon needs to do, is it needs to actually strengthen the capacity of its own state to respond to its own citizens and to tell its own people that forces like Iran, as it continues to meddle with groups like Hezbollah, are actually dividing and weakening Lebanon and actually risking it going backwards rather than forwards.
Do you think the Lebanese people are ready for peace with Israel?
I think it's a little premature at this point because you have to get through the step-by-step process where the Lebanese government itself builds and rebuilds trust and confidence with its own people. The second step is that Israel steps back and feels like its security interests are secured. And then there are bigger issues. There are big questions that are still unresolved about this Gaza ceasefire. And I think it'll be really difficult for any neighboring government, any country to actually get to a full path of peace and stability without some commitment from the Israeli government towards steps towards a two-state solution on the Palestine front. And that's what I think we're all waiting for to see. This month, several visitors are coming to Washington, D.C., including Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. I don't think anyone expects that it'll make any leaps in the direction of normalization with Israel, in part because the current Israeli government does not seem to support some sort of pathway to a two-state solution, and things are better than they were when compared to when the war was happening in Gaza, but still not great for the Palestinian people. I think it's extremely difficult for the Lebanese government or any other government to move forward beyond sort of the tactical operational steps of deconfliction on the southern Lebanese, northern Israeli front.
Brian Katulis, thank you so much for being my guest on This is America, and thank you for sharing those insights. Coming up next, we take a closer look at our report of the week by Kalien Antoine.
From the FBI's most wanted list to the White House. November 10. Donald Trump welcomes Ahmad Al-Sharaa, the first Syrian president to set foot in Washington since 1946. For decades, U.S. sanctions kept Syria isolated, until now. A former jihadist turned head of state, a historic and controversial moment. Trump calls him a man with a brutal past, but necessary for success.
I think he's doing a very good job. It's a tough neighborhood, and he's a tough guy, but I got along with him very well, and a lot of progress has been made with Syria. That's a tough one, but a lot of progress has been made. You know, we took the sanctions off at the request of Turkey, at the request of actually Israel.
Days before the visit, viral images on Instagram. Al-Sharaa shooting hoops with U.S. generals. The caption read, "Work hard, play harder." The visit seals Syria's entry into the U.S.-led coalition against ISIS. Washington suspends Caesar Act sanctions and plans a new military base near Damascus. From militant leader to strategic partner, Ahmad Al-Sharaa bets on redemption under the watchful eye of the White House.
That's it for today's episode. The replay is available on all of This is Beirut's platforms. Thank you all for watching, and see you next Wednesday.